Welcome to the Inside Scoop, your one-stop shop for cracking the leadership code. Have you ever wondered what those conversations are like in the boardroom? Curious about the secret sauce successful executives possess? On the Inside Scoop podcast, we sit down with successful executives, getting their unique perspective on what it takes to be a good leader. They'll share their hard-won wisdom, the crucial competencies needed to thrive as a leader, and the unexpected lessons learned along the way. Here, we unlock the secrets of the executive suite. We get the inside track directly from the leaders themselves. In each episode, we'll dissect the essential skills needed to go from manager to leader, offering a leader's perspective on the challenges, triumphs, and unexpected wisdom they've acquired. The Inside Scoop, leadership lessons, served fresh.
Welcome once again to this episode of the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Eduardo Bryant. Today, we're going to dive into an area about coaching as a servant leader and bring out some of the unique ways that you want to do that. This podcast, it's available wherever you get your podcasts. And if you find something that resonates with you, we invite you to subscribe and to become part of our viewing audience. Our person today is none other than Mr. Michael Eckhoff. He is a leader and has been for many years in the executive level. And some of the things that he'll bring out, I think, is truly inspiring. So you're going to want to stay tuned and hear his message. So without any further ado, let's invite him in right now. Well, hello, Mr. Michael Eckhoff. How are you doing today, sir?
I am well, Eduardo. Great to see you again.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to have you here on the show. I've been looking forward to this time together because I think it is going to be excellent. And as I often start out and like to do, I ask all of my guests, here's the first question. We'd like to know, as an audience, what are you reading right now?
Interesting question. Many years ago, at one of our sales kickoff meetings, we had a special guest who was the keynote speaker. And as sitting in the audience as a sales manager fairly early in my career, I had no idea what this gentleman was going to talk to us about. He was listed as a cultural anthropologist. I thought, what does that have to do with sales? But he told some amazing stories. And as an early leader in the organization, it really stuck home with me. He described how throughout history, knowledge was passed down through storytelling. Before the written word, before we were able to record and do podcasts and share knowledge across vast areas, storytelling was the key form of communication. It's how we learned from history. It's how we shared that knowledge with other people. And what he transitioned to was that even though it's not required today, it's still part of our culture. And that idea of storytelling is so fundamental in an organization. And the stories that the people tell specifically about their manager is what defines their perception of that manager. And so it really made me stop and think about, as a manager, what do people say when I'm not there? What are the stories they tell about me? It kind of struck a interest for me in terms of anthropology. And many years ago, I heard about this book called Sapiens by a gentleman, Yuval Noah Harari. Right now, I'm reading the sequel to that book. I have it sitting right here. This book is called Homo Deus. The first book, Sapiens, is subtitled A Brief History, try to get that in the picture there, A Brief History of Humankind. And he takes an anthropological view of the entirety of human history and talks about the cultural influences, the things that happened. It was brilliantly written, very interesting. But the new book, Homo Deus, that I'm reading, is A Brief History of Tomorrow. And in this, he takes a very different point of view, where as an anthropologist, he looks at what are the ambitions, what are the goals, what does humankind want to become? And he brings things like artificial intelligence and computer capability, but also culture and strife and conflict and all of those things together. And weaves just an incredible story that makes you think. And I think that's part of what intrigues me so much about it, is it's things that we see every day, but you actually need to sit down and spend time and think about it and dwell on it. and really put some thought into it. So it's not a quick read, but certainly something I would recommend.
Fascinating. You mentioned so many key things in that. You talked about the whole storytelling aspect. That is so critical. And in leadership, you have to be able to share your information in some type of memorable way. And one of the best ways of doing that is what you just mentioned. That is of telling stories, because that's what helps people become invited into the scene, your world, the story. So I think that that's awesome. Something else you said that I picked up on that I thought was pretty key there is that what are your salespeople saying about you when you're not there? Now, you've heard the old saying, if you could only be a fly on the wall. Well, we'd all love to be that fly on the wall at times because you want to know what's the impact you're making. Sometimes we think we're making a positive impact, and sometimes it turns out not to be. So I love that aspect of you saying, what are they saying after I'm gone? And you know what? If you want positive things to be said about you, then you need to contribute. You need to be a valuable resource to them and to their business. And that's how you get those positive attributes coming out. That's really good. I'll have to check that out. And I like the whole past, present, and the future and how we
Yeah.
interweave. So that sounds like
Yeah, I
a
think part of the, just to build on what you said there, part of that storytelling and that feedback, it's great to get positive feedback. We all love to hear, great job, attaboy, couldn't live without it, it was wonderful. But to be honest, we don't really learn much from that. What we learn from is the what could I have done better? And so part of, I think, how do you get the real feedback? How do you become that fly on the wall? Is give people a safe place to actually share their negative feedback. And you don't just go after a sales call, hey, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Right? You never really get a true answer when you ask a question that way. But so much of it is how you ask the question and say, what could I have done better? Or how could I have helped you be better in terms of preparing for the meeting? Or how could I have helped you be better during the meeting? When the client said this, I thought about jumping in and saying this, how would that have worked? And build those scenarios. And when you start building the scenarios and it becomes part of your standard practice, then people understand that it is a safe space that they can share all their feedback with you. And once you've built that trust in that safe space, then you get the real story.
You bring up something that is a real coaching skill. I'm going to see if I can tease it out for the audience just a little bit. And I love how you brought that out. So we've all had those cases where we say, what did you like? And what could you have done better? When you get to the done better part, there's a whole bunch of things that they can tell you. And, you don't always get, like you said, that real true answer on what they like. Everybody wants to go straight to the negative. But as a coaching tip, one of the things that I've heard is that asking it this way, during the call, if you were to jump in and add something at any point, what was going through your head that you would have added? What is it that you thought I was going to say that I didn't say? What is it that you wanted to insert at the moment, but you didn't want to interrupt me? That provides the safe space for them to say, you could have said blah, blah, blah. You could have gone down this path. And that's how you get more information out of it. Otherwise, you end up not getting true feedback. And we know feedback is a gift. So to your point there, Michael, I think it's a great way of being able to help your sales team be better, because every sales call, there's always something that could have been done better. And they need to know exactly how to do that. And so when you are a servant leader, you are serving them. You're providing that value. So I not only like the way you brought that out, but that dovetails directly into what we're going to be talking about today. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, excellent. Now, I'd like to get into your background a little bit. Talk about your past. Talk about where you are. Talk about how you got to where you are. Because most people on their journey to where they are in life, it was not a straight path. I mean, they didn't just do it linearly. Obviously, there were some curves and some roundabouts. You may have fallen off the cliff a few times and had to pick yourself back up. Certainly, the wind blew left and the wind blew right. Share with us, how did Michael get to where he is today?
Yeah, I mean, it's so well described. When you think about the roundabouts and you think about that path, I think back, a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even, let's not go too far, but 30, 40 years ago. And what are the things that happened that shaped where I am today? And much like those books I talked about, I also think about what is coming a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. One of the things that I feel is somewhat different in my career is that I started in the telecommunications industry during a time of tremendous change. And I didn't expect to do that. I went to school for engineering. Sales was just something I did on the side because my family couldn't afford to put me through college, right? Nobody in my family had ever been to college, very working class, military, hardworking people, but never really got very far ahead. And I knew that my opportunity was to go to college, to learn, to get a degree, to do something more than what I had experienced as a child. But I had to do that myself. I had to earn scholarships. I had to pay. I had to work in many times near full-time jobs while I was going to school. And sales was always just something I did. I had the ability to talk to people. I could go up and approach somebody and not feel embarrassed about it. I could help them understand what they were looking for, steer them in the right way, and then make a sale. And I joke that I perfected the puppy dog sale by selling puppy dogs in the pet store. And I really did that. But I started my career by chance. I went to work after I graduated. I moved to California and I went to work in a phone mart. For the younger folks in the audience, you actually used to have to go to a physical store to buy a phone that you took home and plugged into the wall to be able to talk to somebody. And they used to have these things called phone marts. And that's where I started working. And it was just going to be a retail job until I found my real career. Well, I happened into, by chance, someone coming in. They were interested in a business phone system. And I figured out very quickly that selling a $69 Mickey Mouse phone or selling a $8,000 business phone system, I've made a lot more money in commission selling the business phone system. And so after I happened into one of those, I started focusing on it, and I came in before my work hours, after my work hours, started calling local businesses, and sold a few phone systems. Of course, that wasn't really what the local account executive whose territory I was unknowingly poaching in was real happy about, but it got me an interview and got me a position as a business development rep inside sales. And I kind of never looked back, but I had the benefit of being with a large company that had a very structured training program, that had great mentors, people who were able to share their wisdom, and people who also helped me understand that, you're going to see other people doing things that are really good and things that aren't good. And you got to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. And what do you decide is a lesson to learn not to do? So did well. I advanced quickly. I was always the youngest guy in the room. I was always the one who was the superstar. But I had a few knocks along the way, but they were safe knocks. They were things that happened that taught me a lesson in a way that didn't really hurt me. And then after a career, really almost 15 years in telecommunications, I moved into software. And at the time, I was told you can't make the switch. If you haven't sold software, you can't do it. You're never going to be able to do it. I just didn't accept it because I had always been part of this changing environment. New technology, new things, new processes, new sales tools, new positions, new territories. And so for me, change was the norm, and trying something new was always safe. And I was able to have some great success very early on. And then you reach a point where you start realizing that it all resides on your shoulders. And you've got a team of people that it's not just about your success, it's about their success. And so when those knocks happen, sometimes you're too successful. And you get to a point where you start caring more about the people than you care about, the position that you hold or the accolades, or even the compensation. You focus on bringing in revenue, but if you're moving and advancing those people, then all the knocks and all the circles and all the things that can happen don't really affect you. You're able to move on because you have faith that the future is going to hold something. You may not know what it is yet, but it's going to hold it. So over the past 5-6 years, I've done quite a few small startups. And some of those work out really well, and some of those don't work out so well. It's a much riskier part of the business. But it's also very rewarding to see something come in, take off, to develop people and see them go on to much bigger and better things in their own careers.
That's a great story. And your walk of life, I think it's been great. You brought out something there. You talked about at some point you start to care more about your people. So from a leadership standpoint, is there something that happens? Is it something that someone says? Where does that flip or change, perhaps is a better way of putting it, occur when at first it's about the business and you hire people and you're trying to get things done, to when you start caring more about your employees?
I think it's a couple of things. One, it is a self-confidence, barrier. When you have the confidence to know that you're good at what you do, without being arrogant, you know that you're contributing, you know that you add value, and you start focusing on how do I share that knowledge and how do I expand that knowledge? And how do I help people get better at what they do? I had a very hard lesson, and it goes back to that story about the anthropologist, where I had an employee, somebody who was on my team who was not performing well, who was not showing the will to change, the will to perform. But, I was a young leader and I was going to fix him. I was going to make him better. And I put so much time and attention into him. And finally, somebody came to me and said, "What are you doing? Why are you spending so much time with him?" And I realized that he wasn't willing to grow. And so I made the tough decision to separate and terminate him. A few years later, sitting in this conference with this anthropologist talking, I was sitting next to another person who used to work on my team at that time. And after that person finished his speech talking about the stories people tell about the managers, I asked him the question. I said, "So what stories did you tell about me?" And he, without even stopping for a second, told me, "Well, we wanted to know what he had on you. Because everybody knew he should have been fired a long time ago, but clearly you didn't see it. So we figured he must have something on you, and that's why you wouldn't get rid of him." And I think that helped me understand that it's not about fixing the person. It's about helping them to be the best that they can be. And if they're not willing or able to do that, the best thing that you can do for them is help them find another role or help them find something else to do in life. And once you take away that, it's me, it's my performance, it's my skill, it's my capabilities, and you start thinking about how is this person going to be better, that shift is just a natural thing to happen. Now, I also don't think that every person should do that. I don't think that's the right approach for everybody. And I think one of the biggest problems we see in the industry, and it's true in any sales industry, it's especially true in software sales, is that super sales reps get bored and think they need to be sales managers. And a lot of leaders think that the best sales rep should be a great sales manager. And sometimes they can, but more often than not, the skills and capabilities that make you a great sales rep are very different from the skills and capabilities that make you a great sales manager. And if you don't have the right coaching and mentoring to make that transition, chances are you're going to fail as a manager. And I've seen it happen time and time again. I've coached people not to take the promotion. And sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times, but they're committed and they'll eventually learn. Others are just naturals. And I always tell people, I was a good sales rep. I was never a great sales rep, but I was the guy that people came to when they had questions. Hey, how does this product work? Or what about this feature? What about this capability? How do you enter it into this system? What do you do when somebody says this? Or how do you handle this objection? And I found my enjoyment in strategizing and answering those questions. And that, to me, is why I focused on leadership.
So as a coach, as a leader, the things that you've done in that role will take you to here. So as I think about what you were just saying there, and by the way, I think you're really hitting the nail right on the head with that. So let's expand that for a second. I want to talk a little bit about the role of a leader, the role of a manager. You mentioned coaching. So now your statement about helping people become the best that they could be. So there's many hats you have to wear. The whole coaching piece is part of that. I want to talk about that coaching piece because here you are banging your head against the wall, leading the horse to water, but you certainly can't make him drink, metaphorically speaking. You're trying your very best to get this one person. And then the perception by the rest of the team, people, is, what does this guy have on you? Because we knew he should have been gone, but you simply didn't seem to see that. The coaching part of it, that's got to be one of the areas that I think a lot of managers have a very difficult time, is coaching. What are your thoughts around that?
So I think there's a couple of aspects to it. One, I played sports all my life. I think about sales coaching just like I do sports coaching. People have natural talent and ability, some more, some less. The coach's job is not to weed out the ones that aren't good. It's to make everybody as good as they can be. So to help somebody reach their potential, or work towards reaching their potential. But it is absolutely a two-way agreement. And I've actually had coaching contracts in the past where we both sign the mentor-mentee relationship agreement that says, I'm here to help you, but you have to actually take responsibility for your own growth. And it's very easy to see, we talk about skill versus will. And many of the matrix, if you do 9-box assessments, things like that, a lot of it comes down to skill versus will. Someone with all the skill in the world, but isn't willing to learn or grow, is a great role player. You can put them in a job and just leave them alone and expect them to do that job really well. Somebody that's got all the desire and all the will, but no skill, you can give them opportunities to learn. You give them the ability. And if they truly have the will, then they're going to focus on learning. And if they have the capacity to learn, then they'll get better and they'll continue to grow. And then you have the people who have a high rating in skill and a high rating in will. And in many ways, you leave them alone, but you're there when they need you. And that's kind of the way I always describe it to a new sales team or to a new rep, which is, I am not going to micromanage you. This is your job, but this is also your business. And the way you run your business is up to you. I'm not going to force you to do it. I use things like KPIs to measure the business. I don't like the activity-based metrics or KPIs on an individual, because if I have to tell you you need to do 50 calls a day, or you need to send 20 emails a day, then you're in the wrong job. And I'm not a manager. I'm a manager, not a leader. And I've never been a manager in my life, and I don't ever intend to be a manager. Because if you want to succeed, if you want to be successful, you've got to take ownership for that. And I'm here to help you do that. But to me, that's the difference between a manager and a leader, is finding people that actually have the desire to learn and grow, and me helping them. And also being the first one to admit, if I can't help you, if I don't have the skill to help you with your problem, then I can go help you find somebody that does. But recognizing I don't know everything. I'm figuring it out just like everybody else is as we go. And the best reps, the ones that I've over my career, and I can name probably a handful over my career that I've worked with, the ones that consistently double and triple their annual earnings are the ones that proactively reach out to me on a regular basis. Not because I'm telling them something great, not because I'm giving them some sage advice, but because they want to strategize. They want to talk through things. They don't want to go make decisions and just, check the box. They want to consistently improve. And they're not doing that just to me. They're doing that to 5 other people inside the company and outside the company as well. And to me, that's the sign of a true high performer, is somebody that's proactively asking for help, is willing to take a chance and fail, but knows how to overcome that.
Yeah, we often would tell reps, reach out to us. Don't let us always have to reach out to you. So the advice that we give, and sometimes you'll find reps that will take that advice, and then you know that there's something in them, that they're going to be a superstar because they proactively are saying, hey, show me what I'm doing wrong. It's almost like, to use a baseball metaphor, it's like the guy that's going to get in the batter's box and take some swings. And he says to one of his people, hey, can you stand over here and watch me? Just watch my swing. And then you take, I don't know, a dozen swings or so. And then you say, what did you see? And you allow the person then to say, you know, you're dropping your elbow, you're taking your eye off the ball, you're not keeping your front face, you're twisting your hips and losing your momentum. Those types of things are good because now it helps people to say, thank you, I appreciate that. Now I've got something to work on. We've all been a young manager. We've all been new at doing this. And most of us understand the difference between managing and leading. So we're trying to instantly get to the leadership role. New manager, just been promoted up, but you don't want to stay in that spot long. And you definitely don't want to be learning on the job at the expense of your team. So as we think about the stuff that you talked about when you are an actual leader and you're not micromanaging, how can we take these newly promoted people and get them ramped up fast so that they step into the space of leadership versus that management area? How do we do that?
Well, I think it starts by identifying the right person. Because again, just taking your top sales rep and promoting them to be a manager is more often than not going to fail. And I love the baseball analogy that you used, and I'll step back to that for a second as I think about this question. Do you know the difference between the manager on a baseball team and the leader, the coach of every other sport out there?
I think I do.
Go ahead. It's a simple answer. The uniform.
The uniform.
Right? Think about it. It used to be basketball. You watch the NBA, they're wearing, Armani suits and ties. Used to be the coaches in football would. Now it's more sweatshirts, but, they're all dressed in street clothes. The baseball manager is wearing the same uniform as the players. And although I don't know if it's ever happened that a manager actually went out on the field and took a play, they could. They look like they could, right? They are there. Many of them are former players. They're that consummate player coach. And I think it's the same thing as you think about your team. How do you identify the person that's ready for that leadership role? Well, I think about it as, are they the one that everybody goes to when they have questions? If somebody tries to get a hold of me and they have a question about a deal and I'm at a customer call or on an airplane or can't talk to them right away, who do they call next? And if they're calling Jane and she's the one that gets that call all the time, and trust me, I know who they're calling, then she's the one that's ready. Whether or not she's the best sales rep isn't really the most important factor. Now, you got to have a minimum expectation. You got to have an expectation of performance, right? And this is definitely a culture of accountability. And so you've got to take accountability for your own performance. But the person who's performing, but also the one that people naturally go to, that's the characteristics and traits that I'm looking for. Now, when I'm hiring from outside, I ask a few simple questions. I think about things like that, which is, who do you go to when you need help? And how do you respond when somebody comes to you and needs help? And just, tease that out a little bit. Talk about how they respond to that and how much time do they spend with their teammates. When you bring them into the role, so much of the behavior that we learn as humans in general, and I know this as a parent, is mimicking the behavior that we see. Mm-hmm. And bad managers make bad reps. And there are many of them out there, and I've seen and worked for quite a few of them. Right? And we won't go into the stories to protect the guilty, but there are definitely stories out there that are just unbelievable. And you can get by with bad behavior in this business for a period of time. And sometimes, I did a post on somebody's LinkedIn this week. Sometimes for the job, you need a jackhammer, but sometimes you need a scalpel. And you can't be a jackhammer all the time. But there are people who take that approach in leadership. And if you grew up and had some success and you made a lot of money and your leader was a jackhammer all the time, then you're going to think that's the way to do it. And I've hired people in who take that approach and they follow a regimented process and they, I'm up at 5 a.m. and I expect all my reps to be here before I get here. And that's just not how people operate. And so, that might have worked at one point, but for me now, it's about how do you teach that emotional intelligence to understand what motivates a person? How does that person learn? We all learn differently, right? Some people need to experience it. When I'm going out with a new rep or a new manager for the first time, typically I'll try to book 3 or 4 meetings in the first day, or the first day that we're together. And I'll ask them, how do you want to handle these meetings? Do you want to lead and we'll just talk about it after? Do you want me to lead one? How do we do that? And give them the opportunity to share how they learn best. But it requires a lot of attention. You can't just put them in the field and turn them loose and hope that it works. So that's the most time-consuming part of a second or third line leadership role, is really working and developing your managers to make sure that they're developing their people, to ultimately create that next generation of managers and that next generation of high performers.
Those are great nuggets. I will play this podcast back and take several notes on that, because you just laid out a recipe of success for management. And the analogies that you use are, I think, so spot on and appropriate, because those are the things that we deal with as a manager. And those are the kind of things that will help us to become much better at what we do. And the reps out there will appreciate that, because the approach that you take as a leader can have a dramatic effect on their performance. And that's what we do. I mean, as a servant leader, we're trying to coach people to get better. And the things that you talked about around, how can I make this person better? One of the things you said is, you don't just take all the people and then figure out who are the worst ones and then all the good ones. It's take everybody and make them the best that they can possibly be. So from that standpoint, we think about, all right, here we are. We're a leader. We've got a team of people. We're trying to make them the best that they can possibly be. And we're doing everything that we can. Sharpening the skills for us will help them. And you talked about people will mimic what you do. Let me tell you, as a rep, you mimic what your manager does. Managers, they are in such a key role that they've got to be aware of their, we call it executive presence, because everything that they do, somebody's watching and somebody's going to take it to heart and do that. So throughout your career, you couldn't have been there overnight. There had to have been some pitfalls that helped you to develop the skills that you are, pontificating today on this podcast about how you got where you are. Share with us a couple of those things. Was that a person or a manager or a coach? Somewhere down the line, this wisdom had to come into your head through something.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to my very first professional job when I started working for that telephone company, selling telephone systems as a business development rep. Back in the day when it was make 100 phone calls a day, just dialing for dollars. And the field account executive that I was partnered with, I used to joke, we actually as a team went to see Glengarry Glen Ross in the movie theater when it first came out. But I joked that he was the Jack Lemmon. He was the grizzled old sales guy who started off selling unfinished furniture, sold copiers, sold phone systems. He'd drive around in his company car all over Los Angeles, selling phone systems. And many of the things that I learned from him. And his little nuggets, his little words of wisdom over the years still come back. And I remember we had a deal that was supposed to come in end of the month. We had big commission on it, probably a bonus tied to it. And we had a role that was called a sales support associate. And they basically did all our paperwork, right? They'd book meetings, they'd do the paperwork, they'd make sure the contracts got processed. And he made a mistake. He didn't fill the paperwork out, right? So it got rejected. We didn't get the deal. And I was fuming. I was mad because, it was a lot of money for me as a young sales rep. And I probably said some things that I regretted later. But Kevin, the field sales rep, said, if you're going to praise somebody, praise in public. Do it where everybody can hear you. But if you've got something negative to say, do it in private. Give that person, the ability to retain their ego and do it in a constructive way. The other thing he taught me was in sales, you've got nothing to give back to other people. Business gets done through quid pro quo. Oh, you need that report done a day early? No problem. Help me out with this and I'll help you out with that. In sales, we're constantly taking. We're always asking for favors. Hey, can you help me get this contract done right away? Can you help me do this? Can you give me this demo faster? We have really nothing that somebody's going to come back to us. And you do that, your quid pro quo is your attitude and your approach and how you treat people. And if you treat people with respect and you treat them with kindness, they're going to remember that and they're going to be willing to help you. Just starting off with that basic foundation of treating people with respect, and being very open about telling people when people do a great job goes a long way. Over the years, I've had, positions where I picked the wrong job. I went to work for somebody who kind of said one story and acted a different way. But you learn from those things as well, because when you start to see that, this is a behavior that I don't like, you better look at yourself and make sure you're not doing that same behavior, right? And that you're not emulating that as well. I come back to, we talked about this concept of, motivating or inspiring. I don't believe that you can motivate someone. If you're not motivating yourself, then I can't motivate you. Hopefully I can inspire you by setting a vision, by setting a goal, by let's take that hill, and by building a relationship with you and trust with you that you want to do those things because I've set that vision. But I can't force you to do it. If you're not motivated on your own, then you're not going to be. And sometimes the best thing you can do for someone, like my friend, is to help them find another career. And if they're not the right person for that role, then ultimately you're helping them by getting them out of a place where they're not going to be successful.
I'm writing down in my head, and I'll take notes later on all of this. I love that. Praise people in public, and if you need to correct something, do that in private. That is a great nugget. I don't know how many managers don't do that, but certainly could benefit from just doing that, especially with gaining respect from their people. I like that. And then you talked about the difference between motivating and inspiring. Many people don't understand that those are different. Like you said, motivation comes from within. You either do have it or you don't have it. But inspiring people, that's what lights the fuel in them to bring out that natural motivation that they have in order to do that. And I think leaders need to understand that. Leaders need to really figure out, what is my role here and how do I do it? Yes, it's to bring new blood into the organization, and certainly it's to train. That is, prime directive number one. You have to train your people to make them the best that they can be. But now you got to have the right people that you bring into the organization, and then being able to help them achieve their goals. Those are skills that people don't have. And when you were talking about just because you were the best salesperson doesn't mean you'll be the best manager to lead the team. I think that's a mistake. And I think that goes into how people hire. They interview people based on their skills. You've worked at a similar company, you've been in the industry for a number of years, your resume is peppered with all of the things that you've done that speaks the same language of what we do here at this company. So that's not always the best person. Sometimes you need someone who has more of a emotional intelligence ability and a high score to be able to say, I can lead a team. The widget is only the widget, but let's lead the team down the road. And that's what I'm really good at. So for managers out there who are saying, where do I fit in this? What's my role? I mean, what do I play in this? How do I identify? How do I know if I'm really good at leadership? I mean, How did you know that you were really good at leadership? You said you were a good salesperson, not the best, but you knew you were really good at leadership. How can people know that?
Yeah, I don't think you can. Quite honestly, I still question sometimes, like, am I the right person for this role? Am I the best leader that I can be? I think the minute you think you're really good at something is when the trouble's going to start, because that's when, you get to that point where you realize everything you don't already know. And that happens very quickly. And we get these plateaus of confidence where we think, oh, I've done it all. I've been there. I know it all. I've got all these nuggets of wisdom. And then something happens and you're like, I never saw that coming. Like, I have no idea where that came from. And it just resets your baseline. I've had products that I thought were the greatest thing ever. And I get out there and customers are like, yeah, not really interested. I think a lot of it comes down to that establishing, not just for your team, but also with your peers and your leaders, the safe zone to be open and honest, to be vulnerable. And when you show that you're vulnerable, other people are willing to accept that and be vulnerable with you. And accepting that, you know what, we lost that deal. Let's talk about why we lost it. What can we do differently? What can we do better? Not sitting back and blaming. I actually worked for a company that somebody really smart made this comment to me after about a year and a half or so. This was a European company from the DACH region, German-speaking part of Europe. And he said, I've figured out the difference between our salespeople and American salespeople. I'm like, okay, what is it? He says, when something goes wrong, your first reaction is to fix it and then figure out what happened. Our first reaction is to figure out who to blame and then worry about fixing it later. And that, again, it actually goes back to baseball, right? Everything comes back to baseball in some way or another. If you look at sports, a lot of European sports like downhill skiing, which is the national sport of Austria, you're first or you don't exist. There is no in between. You either win the race or you're done. In baseball, the best hitters in all of history were out 3 out of 5 times they stepped up to the plate. More often than not, you're not going to be successful, but you have a very short memory and you have the confidence to get back up there again and know that the next time I get up there, I'm knocking it out of the park. Right. And that attitude, I think, is what helps that leader really take risks, try things, expect to fail, actually relish the failure, because that's one thing you don't have to try again. Right. And when you start learning that, people feel that safety. They feel that ability that, I can take a chance and my manager's going to have my back, or I can go to Eduardo and say, I don't know what to do. And you're not going to yell at me and tell me that I should go figure it out. You're going to sit down, you're going to talk to me. We're going to strategize. We're going to come up with a strategy. We're going to try it. And if it works, great, we'll celebrate. If it doesn't work, we're going to try something else. And building that trust, that feeling in the organization, ultimately, the term is that culture, is what I think empowers really high-performing sales teams.
I would agree with you. And that takes a lot of skill for managers and for leaders to actually get to that point where they give a employee the autonomy to take risks, to take chances. And if they fail, together, they partner. Like you talked about the baseball coach, the manager of a baseball team wears the uniform. I love that. They do. So they feel a sense of, we're together. I mean, they're there in the dugout and they've got the same uniform. Mm-hmm. So they look like everyone else. They're part of the team. They feel like that, and people can see that. And so now a leader who says, try it. If it doesn't work out, we can always fix that. But there's a difference there. And it comes down to this, Michael. When you're in a leadership role, you've got to figure out, how much of my time do I spend teaching skills and developing skills versus product knowledge? product training, making sure that the person that's below you that works for you is very adept at whatever your service or product is. And we find that when they've got what we call national sales meetings, they all come together, very little actual skill development training takes place. It's almost all product knowledge. The balance there.
That's a shame.
But it really is. You're absolutely right. And that's what takes place. So all of these things and these nuggets that you're talking about, these are skills that a leader has developed that they're trying to put in their people without just doing a lot of product training. I had a call just before this call, and we talked a lot about that level of product training versus skill training. You say it's a shame. It happens at almost every national sales meeting.
Yeah. And, it used to be that was the norm. That was the expectation because, pre-internet or even, as little as 5 to 10 years ago, we were much more in this enterprise-led sales model, where as a buyer, if I want to buy your product, I have to talk to you to learn about your product, right? If I want to buy a car 20 years ago, I had to go to a car dealership. I had to look at the brochure, the paper brochure. I had to talk to the sales rep. I had to find out what the options were, get them to build a price quote. I needed you. Those days are gone. Today, every product out there, whether you put it on your website or not, there are independent review sites. There's, crowdsourced tools. I won't, name them, but everybody knows who they are. I can go find out pretty much everything I need to know about your product. Probably go get a demo, maybe get a free trial, maybe sign up for the account and use the product for free. Product-led growth motions and product-led sales motions have completely changed the job of a sales rep. No longer are we the owners of knowledge. When we were the owners of knowledge, we had to have that knowledge, and we had to be able to recite and answer those questions. Today, our customers, in many cases, will know more about our product than we do. So what value do we bring, right? We bring the value of helping them determine internally, can they do this? How do they sell it internally? How do they actually make the purchase that's going to solve the problem they have? We don't do that by reciting product features and functionalities. We do it by listening. We do it by talking to the person, by having enough knowledge about their industry and their company that we can add value to the conversation. But that's not about product features. So with my sales teams, I always try to take the approach of, here's the standard onboarding, here's the advanced level courses, go learn this. Here's people in the organization, the product owner, developer, tester, whatever it is, go talk to those people to learn about the product. What we want to do when we're together is utilize the time that we're together, whether it's over a Zoom call or whether it's in person, to practice our skills, to do scenarios, to try things, to throw it. Hey, I heard this customer ask me this crazy question. I had never heard this before. And I made up an answer, but I don't know what the right answer is. Let's talk about it as a team, and let's help each other. Let's hone our skills. And, I think that's what's most important when you're in training is practicing your skill. Just like on a baseball team, they spend a lot more time in practice than they do in a game and on the field.
Good point. Actually, that is a solid point. Because I think that level of practice, you mentioned scenarios and so forth, is key. And this is what we need to be doing, opposed to showing up and just going through all the product and looking at all the information. We call it kicking the tires, doing a lot of that kind of stuff versus how do I make this guy better? Storytelling. You opened up and talked about the ability and the power of telling stories. When we can teach reps and people who are out there selling how they can communicate their information, deliver it in a story format, that's what becomes memorable. People will remember that and they become part of the story. In many cases, you invite them into your world. That's what makes a difference. Knowing that you care, because the old saying is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That statement has been around for years, but it carries so much weight. And as leaders, we need to understand that and be able to bring that in. Whether you are a new leader or you've been leading teams for 15, 20 years, it's time that we start recognizing that our job is to coach as a servant leader. We are the ones that are bringing information to people, but mostly we are helping to develop their skills. It sounds like you've been doing that your entire life in management, Michael.
Well, I've had some great coaches. I still have some incredible mentors, people that I call when I don't know. But I also have that faith that if I make a mistake, what's the worst thing that could happen? I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to have a beautiful family. I'm still going to have a loving group of friends, and I'm going to find another opportunity. And so, to me, that makes it simple, right? Do the right thing, and good things will come. And I may not know what they are yet, but they will.
Another great point. You know what? This has been awesome, Michael. I have enjoyed this thoroughly. I mean, you have brought out so many areas that managers, leaders really need to be good at doing. And I love your analogies and the way that you've helped. I mean, I can only imagine if I was driving my car down the road and listening to this, I'd want to save it and come back and listen to it again. So I think this has just been awesome because these are great points. As a leader, these are the things that will not only make you a better leader, but also help you build high-performing teams. I'm going to give you a chance here, Michael, in case there's anything else that you wanted to say that you didn't have a chance to say or thought about saying but didn't say as you address the audience. I'm going to open up the mic, as they say, give you the floor, and let you be able to say any parting words that you'd like to say to the audience. The floor is yours, sir.
I'll say one thing, but I'll precede that with thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and having these kind of conversations, just like practicing sales, having these conversations, reinforce it for me of thinking the things that, that was a good thing to do. And that probably wasn't a great thing to do. I love the quote that you shared just a minute ago about caring. And I have hanging up on my wall here a quote that I see every day when I'm standing here at my stand-up desk. And it's very famous, very well-known, Maya Angelou, which is people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I feel like if we can approach that every day as a sales rep, as a leader, in any place you are, if you think about how people feel and what you're doing to help people feel, it's going to work out.
Great point. You know what? Thank you. And I love that quote as well. So I appreciate you taking time. It's not easy to get an audience with you executives. So I don't take it lightly. And I certainly appreciate you guys lending some time to this podcast. So thank you very much for that. And for everybody that's been listening, I have thoroughly enjoyed it. And I truly hope that you have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with Michael as well. And if you did, once again, we invite you to subscribe and to become part of our viewership. So until we have an opportunity to come together again, thank you for watching or listening to this episode of The Inside Scoop. Bye for now.
For more exclusive leadership insights, be sure to subscribe to The Inside Scoop on YouTube and Spotify. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that share button and spread the word. See you next time on The Inside Scoop.